One area, though, that I deem myself to not necessarily be an expert in, but have a lot of knowledge about, is, of course, my Brooklyn Nets. And, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, it has been a rough start to begin this season. Brooklyn sits at 1-2 on the year after succumbing to an onslaught from Desmond Bane and John Morant on Monday. They lost. They got draxed by New Orleans on opening night. They won a gritty game against the Toronto Raptors 2 days later. I believe that was Friday night. But there are some issues with this team. One of them still being Steve Nash. And if you guys are new to the show, you're probably going to be like, you're probably going to be asking yourself, Zach, why are you already bitching about Steve Nash? Like, that's not very nuanced of you. And you're right. It is not charitable to bitch about the coach of your favorite team 3 games into the season. But the thing about me is that I've been bitching about Steve Nash since January. I have been complaining about his ass for 8 fucking months, for 9 fucking months. The same gestation period as a woman has for a child. That has been my hatred for Steve Nash. I thought he should have been fired during the summer, and it's apparent that after these 3 games, as many issues as Brooklyn has, a lot of them are repeat issues. The team comes out, starts slow. They had a slow start against New Orleans. They had a little bit of a slow start against Toronto. Their start against Memphis was scorching, but they started the third quarter super slow. This is a trademark of Steve Nash, is just his teams just do not get up for these games right away. And then you fall into the cycle of starting slow, leading on Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and then having all of your other guys fall out of rhythm. It happens at different parts of different games. It happens against good teams. It happens against bad teams. And that is not something that they can get away with this year, given how stacked the Eastern Conference is. Also, defensively, I don't know if it was just this game against Memphis, and I'm going to be more charitable, not to Steve Nash, but to the players themselves, even though Brooklyn ranks 30th in defensive rating and 28th in points per game allowed. They got off slow against New Orleans on opening night. I gave them a pass because it was opening night. You had Royce O'Neal trying to fit into the system. Of course, you had Ben Simmons trying to fit in. We will get to that in a little bit. I have some thoughts on him as well. They did sack up against Toronto. They won a gritty game down the stretch, largely in part because they locked down Toronto, relatively speaking, of course, but just enough to allow their offense to come around. They got timely stops down the stretch of the game. Granted, Toronto still shot the lights out. I mean, I'm looking at the box score right here. Shot 56% in the fourth quarter, 51% for the second half as a whole. But Brooklyn managed to defend without fouling and, again, get timely stops. And that's really all you can ask of your defense if they're, playing like shit, is get timely stops. Now, against Memphis, I don't know what happened with Royce O'Neal. I was so smitten with Royce O'Neal after the first 2 games. I loved his activity. I loved his disruption. I loved his hands on defense, getting deflections, swiping the rock away on drives, just bringing all of the things that you would want from a 3-and-D guy. I don't know what happened against Memphis. I don't know if he was confused about the coverages. I don't know if he was expecting one type of coverage to be ran while covering Desmond Bane, and Steve Nash didn't want to do that. But Desmond Bane erupted for 38, I think was the final tally. 32 in the second half. And there were multiple possessions where Royce O'Neal just straight up lost him on the perimeter, whether it was just entirely blowing the assignment, not taking the shortest, most efficient route coming off of a screen. Regardless, either way, the end result was leaving Desmond Bane, who is an elite shooter, too much space, and him cashing in on the 3. Of course, I do not want to, come off as a hater on Desmond Bane. Guy is a demon, absolutely shot the lights out. Sometimes when you're going up against shooters, they're just gonna make shots like that, and it happens. But the difference was that Desmond Bane didn't just look like Desmond Bane. He looked like pre-Achilles injury Klay Thompson. He looked like 2017, 2018 Klay Thompson, getting to every spot that he wanted and just managing to get the shot off and put the shot down before his man was even capable of reacting to the shot. It was the strangest thing. And I know, again, Desmond Bane is an elite shooter, moves without the ball exceptionally well, but everyone understands that there is a level of difference to Desmond Bane and Klay Thompson at his peak. And again, I don't know how that, like, I don't know where the breakdown was. I don't know. Like, I really don't know. But also, I do know that Brooklyn's defense was not that great collectively against Memphis. Also, that game against Memphis was very goofy because the officiating was super strange for both teams. There was a lot of physicality on Memphis's end that they got away with, and it was not given, the Brooklyn Nets were not given the same treatment. Ben Simmons fouled out of the game on the most ticky tack foul that I think I've ever seen. In all my years of watching basketball, I have seldom seen a player crowd a ball handler near half court and just only put one hand on their hip and get called for a foul. And the thing was, Ja wasn't even dribbling. Ben Simmons did not impede his progress in any way. The hand on the hip is much more of a reasonable call when a player is dribbling, when a player is trying to get downhill, when a player is trying to create something offensively, not when they're at the top of the key running the clock out and knowing that he's already got five, you're going to pin that foul onto him. I thought that was disgraceful. There were people like non-Nets fans on Twitter talking about the goofiness that was the officiating as well, which I mean always gives like it's always a great reinforcement of what I'm seeing because I absolutely despise when fans complain about the officiating because it's such an easy thing to bitch about because NBA officiating is, I don't want to say it's bad because it's not bad, but when it feels bad or when it looks bad, only exacerbates the problem. I think another issue and something that the NBA will have to reckon with as a whole is how do they transition to a more FIBA like style of officiating? A game with increased physicality where guys aren't, baiting as hard or guys don't get rewarded for baiting as hard because that's another thing. The referees will 100% buy into the acting job that these players put on. Whether it's on screens, especially if you're a smaller player, setting a screen on a big and you flop just a little bit, you will get rewarded for that. You will get rewarded for your acting job. But aside from the fouls, aside from the lackluster level of defense, there are some good things that I want to talk about with Brooklyn. The first thing is, of course, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. I would be remiss not to mention these dudes who are absolutely going nuclear to begin the campaign. Between them, they're averaging 59 points, 59.3 points. And this is all without them really being super accurate from the perimeter. KD's at 33% to start the year. Kai is at 28% to begin the year. They are absolutely here to ball. They are not fucking around. They want to win a championship. Now, as great as they are, I mentioned this in the beginning, Steve Nash has to find a way to not lean on these guys all season long. You got to find ways to have Patty Mills be more of a factor. He's currently at 11 points a game, which is good, shooting 47% from the field, which is good. You just have to find ways to continue to get him at these easy shots. Of course, the elephant in the room is Joe Harris. The Nets offense looks drastically different when Joe Harris is on the court, and that is evidenced by the minutes he played in Memphis. When he's out there playing alongside KD, Kyrie, Clax, Royce O'Neal, there is a dynamic to this Nets team that they become increasingly harder to guard because the defense has to scurry around more. They have another shooter that they have to worry about on top of O'Neal, on top of KD, on top of Kyrie. This was something they missed for almost the entirety of last season. This is something they greatly missed in the postseason against Boston. And it's comforting to see that when Joe Harris is on the court, Brooklyn is palpably better. Joe Harris, his plus minus net is plus 21.3. Of course, 3 games, 40 minutes, not that big of a sample size. But the Nets are also almost 4 points per 100 possessions better when he is on the court. That is huge. And that's huge, again, because you're going to run into these issues where you cannot play Ben and Clax together for extended periods of time. You simply do not have enough shooting to sustain it. That is a good lineup down the stretch of games defensively, but if you're playing from behind trying to manufacture offense, your defense is not this defense as it stands right now is not built to weather that storm. Maybe things will change down the line, but I love them getting Joe Harris involved. I love him looking more confident. He is noticeably more confident now that he is seemingly fully healed. He looks like the guy that Nets fans have fallen in love with. He's still, moving great without the basketball. His sea legs are under him again. His shot looks strong. His shot looks confident. He is attacking again, or he's trying to get back into the flow of attacking. Granted, that is something entirely different that you can't really replicate during rehab. I mean, you can replicate, stationary shooting, and I think that's why his shot still looks so good, even though he's only converting at like 33%. But there is a lot to be confident about with Joe Harris. I'm very excited for when he's fully acclimated to this role. I'm very excited for when Seth Curry gets healthy because he provided a lot of the dynamic that Brooklyn missed with Joe Harris down the stretch of last season into the postseason. He doesn't have the same size. He is a better playmaker, though, is capable of handling the ball, I'd say, more securely than Joe Harris is. But ideally, in a perfect world, you have this rotation of shooters that you can deploy ad nauseum. You have this trio of Patty Mills, Seth Curry, and Joe Harris who all occupy a similar role, and all of whom are comfortable playing alongside Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and will at some point get along to being confident around Ben Simmons. Another person, or another couple of guys who I'm incredibly happy to see their development are Nic Claxton and Sharpe. He's at 4 points per game and 6 boards per game, 1 block per game, only shooting 38.5% from the field, though. That is an issue with Sharpe, is he is just fumbling all of these attempts around the basket. He missed a bunch against New Orleans, did not look that strong with the ball against Memphis. But having lived through Nic Claxton and having seen how he's progressed, that is something that I think will come eventually, especially because I feel that Sharpe has a more NBA-ready body than Nic Claxton did. I mean, even now, just comparing the two, 6'11", Nic Claxton is only 215, according to NBA.com or according to Basketball Reference. And Sharpe, meanwhile, is 6'11", 265. He's that girth, that meat, that thickness that Brooklyn is going to need in the paint to contend with guys like Steven Adams, Bam Adebayo, Jonas Valanciunas. I'm not really too concerned about how they perform against Embiid and Giannis, mainly because no defense performs well against Embiid and Giannis. It doesn't matter. You could put fucking Hakeem on those guys and they would still probably get 25. But Sharpe has looked good on the boards. I really think that the Nets are going to ask a lot of him this year to build the paint, to really just harass both ends of the glass, just be a strong presence on the interior for extended periods of time, 18, 20, 22 minutes. Again, that might be a little bit of an ask because he is still so young and he didn't really get that much playing time last year, but in the limited minutes that I've seen of him, he passes the eye test, or passes the eye test in the sense that he has the potential to evolve into this guy that Brooklyn so desperately needs. He just needs to figure it out. He's exceptionally raw, but he's got the size. He's got the athleticism. He just needs to refine his skill set a little bit more. And someone who has refined this skill set remarkably well is Nic Claxton. I am so happy that this kid is finally finding his way with this team. It's been 3 years. We've waited 3 years for this moment. Clax is a walking double-double at this point, averaging 16 and 10, close to 3 blocks per game, shooting 75% on 9 attempts. That is remarkable considering he is getting higher degree of difficulty shots, more contests on these shots. The thing that I really love to see about Clax, and I don't think I can properly articulate how much I'm loving his development, is that during his first 3 seasons with Brooklyn, he looked scared. He looked like he knew he was big, but he was afraid to play big. And of course, there are, just biological limitations, his strength, his weight. He looks noticeably stronger. He looks more aggressive as well. And most importantly, he looks more confident in his ability to produce at the center position for the Brooklyn Nets. Being strong with the ball around the basket is the biggest one that I've noticed. When he gets dump offs in the paint, he goes up strong. He has a solid grip on that rock. It's not getting swatted away as he's going up. He's learning to keep the ball higher in the paint, because the last thing you want to do as a center is shrink down to the level of wings and guards, especially if you're crashing the glass, because when you drop down low, they have the advantage. Their hands are quicker. They've got better ball skills. Keep the ball high so that way, if they do try to make a reach, they hit your elbow, they hit your forearm, you get rewarded with some free throws. Also, coming down with offensive boards and knowing when to go back up with the ball and knowing when to resettle and whether go up a second time after resettling or kick it out. I think that is the biggest thing that young centers need to learn, because coming up through high school, through college, you're so accustomed to putbacks, to easy second shot opportunities, that you don't really learn the proper ball skills until you get to the NBA. And you learn that if you get the ball and you come down with it, you keep it low, it gets swiped away by a guard. Whereas if you're, getting boxed out by Fred VanVleet, it's easier for you to read the ball properly off the rim and just put it back with a dunk or a layup. And I mean, again, shooting 60 or 75% overall, shooting 84% inside of 3 feet. That is huge. I think those numbers are a little inflated, but I do think that also Clax has the potential to be a guy who shoots 70% inside of 3 feet, because he had done it last year. He has maintained, great efficiency throughout his 4 years of basketball, but it's the volume now that's different. Going from 5.5 shots to 9 is a huge jump for someone who isn't accustomed to having the ball in their hands. He also looks much better on defense. He's still fouling a lot. He's got 9 fouls in 3 games, but his ball, or how do I say this? His shot blocking IQ is noticeably higher. He's at 2.7 blocks per game. He had 2 against New Orleans, 2 against Memphis, 4 against Toronto. The mark of a great shot blocker is not only the shots that they divert, not only their presence on the perimeter, but it's their ability to block shots without fouling. If you block a shot, prevent 2 points, that's great. You volleyball it out to your guard, you get a run, that's a 4-point swing. But if you block a shot that you have no business attempting to block, you give up two foul shots to most likely a high-level free throw shooter. And that is another thing that young centers tend to struggle with, because it's so different blocking shots in college and blocking shots in the NBA. Guys are bigger, stronger, guys' bags are deeper, their repertoires are more refined, they have more spots that they're comfortable from on the floor. And my rule of thumb is, if you're averaging at least 1 block per foul, that's a good ratio. Of course, if we take a look at a guy like Hakeem Olajuwon, for his career averaged 3.5 personal fouls to 3 blocks. And this is like this is arguably the greatest defensive player the NBA has ever seen. Even when he led the league in blocks, which he did on 3 occasions, his fouls were within 1 per game. I mean, in 1990, averaged 4.5 blocks and 3.8 fouls. The following year, 3.9 blocks, 3.9 fouls. And again, because when you gamble on defense, because that's what you're doing as a shot blocker, it is effectively what great defensive guards do. They gamble. You are going to get dinged for some fouls. But if your blocked shots can offset that, that is, again, the mark of a great shot blocker. I'm not saying that Nic Claxton is a great shot blocker yet, because this is only, again, his 4th year in the league. This is the first year where he's really popping off on defense, but the potential is there. The ball skills are there. The discipline is there more than anything else. That is another huge thing. Talk about with shot blockers is their discipline. And I'm just so happy that Nic Claxton is finally putting it all. He's finally put it all together, or is putting it all together offensively, defensively, everything. Now, I cannot finish this segment without talking about Ben Simmons. And folks are getting their jokes off. Listen, listen. I understand. I understand where y'all are coming from. Ben Simmons has looked like Dookie Butt to begin this season. Less than 6 points a game, 7 assists, 6 boards, has fouled out of 2 of his first 3 games in a Brooklyn Nets uniform. A lot of this slander is coming from Philly fans because Philly fans just they're preying on his downfall. And I get it. It was an unceremonious breakup, not the best relationship right now, but you know, we are a reactionary bunch on NBA Twitter. We love to get our jokes off. We love to be haters. I understand. I'm not exempt from that. But the reality of the situation is that this guy is trying to come back from basketball after being away from it for almost 2 years. The amount of bullshit he went through with Philadelphia, the, rehabs he had to go through for multiple injuries, the constant just like uncertainty about his return with Brooklyn. Oh, he's going to play in game 4 of the first round of the playoffs. Oh, he's not going to play in game 4. Oh, he's been playing 5-on-5 scrimmages, but he's actually hurt while doing so. It was just like the worst fucking situation known to man. I very much wish that they handled it the same way that Kawhi Leonard handled his injury. And it was kind of just like Kawhi will come back when Kawhi is ready to come back. And what happened? Kawhi came back from multiple injuries when he was ready to come back. Of course, there wasn't without some drama there. There was, that whole bullshit with the Spurs getting upset that he sought a second opinion, this, that, whatever. Again, a messy situation. But Ben Simmons is trying to come back on a new team. And he has, yes, admittedly gotten off to a slow start, soft, slow, however you wanna categorize it. And I think he's in a similar situation as Joe Harris. He's trying to get reacclimated to this team, and being someone who's so ball dominant, it's not easy for him to do that, especially when you have to try to figure out your spot alongside Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Now, also admittedly, if you don't think that Ben Simmons has looked more confident and more comfortable as each game has gone on, you're lying to yourself. He has. He just hasn't looked to the same level as the guy that was averaging 20 points a night when Joel Embiid was hurt. I don't know if we'll ever get that version of Ben Simmons. I hope we do, because much like with Joe Harris, that adds a tremendous dynamic to this team. But things are improving. Granted, they are improving slowly. Now, how much of this slowness can the Nets tolerate? Well, I'm going to be straight up. They will not be able to live with this for very long. I mean, I think the game that Ben Simmons played against Toronto, which I'm showing on screen here, 6 points, 8 assists, 10 boards, only 2 personals, also added 2 blocks. That, I think, is a moderate level of production that we can come to expect from Ben Simmons. I don't think that's asking a lot. You don't need him to be this incredible scorer who averages 16, 18, 20 points because you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, but you need him to be aggressive on offense. That is the one thing I think that's missing, is his aggressiveness towards going downhill. I almost feel like there is this weird complex that is going on where he feels that he has to earn the right to take shots away from Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, because there are instances when the games begin and teams are not guarding Ben Simmons as, they're supposed to be, and he's like just flat out refusing to attack the basket. Meanwhile, when you're being underguarded, the only thing you should be thinking about doing is getting downhill and going towards the cup, so that way you can actually apply pressure on the defense and make them guard you. And then knowing that you're this freak athletic specimen, knowing that you have the IQ and the ability to make these passes out to the corners, whether it be to Kyrie or KD or up at the top of the key, whatever, you have to make the defense guard you. If you're Ben Simmons, you need the defense to respect you. That doesn't mean shooting threes when they're sagging 15 feet off, but literally I really wish I wouldn't have to phrase it like this, but just take your dick and put it on the table. I feel like that's the best way to describe it. Like, make them respect you, attack them, go with their chest, drop a shoulder down. If you take an offensive foul, so be it, but make the defense have to guard you, and then everything else will come more naturally. I think that whatever mental barriers are still left for Ben Simmons, whether it is, he's nervous of injury, whether he's nervous of stepping on somebody's toes in the offense, I don't think that anyone on the Nets cares about that. They care about winning a championship. And to win a championship, they need Ben Simmons to play like himself. They need Ben Simmons to play like how he played against Toronto. They need the Ben Simmons that isn't afraid to put his head down, go to the cup, and dunk on somebody. So to start this year, yes, I am, it's just sitting here kind of perplexed as to why Ben Simmons is not more active. But I do understand that this is, not an easy situation for him to jump into. There are, of course, some just fucking, there's just a lot of goofiness going on with the Nets right now, I think is the best way to describe it. And I am very confident that once he begins to seize the opportunity, things will look way different. Because just imagine you're the Memphis Grizzlies and you have to contend with these ridiculous shots that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are making. These step backs, these fadeaways off of one leg, these offhand floaters that you have to contend with. And then you actually have to put a body on Ben Simmons. Like, that is the final form of the Brooklyn Nets. I think that at some point you see Ben, KD, Kyrie, Royce O'Neal, and Joe Harris as like their death lineup, more or less. And that is, all of those guys operating at peak proficiency is a really, really goofy thought to have to game plan against. I just hope we get there sooner than later.